Welcome back to Nazranis in the City. I'm Josh.
I'm Abhi.
And we are joined by our dear friend, Father, and Chaplain, Father Rajeev Philip. Good to have you back, Father.
It's good to be with you guys.
And we are joined with a special guest appearance. This is, you've heard his name mentioned a number of times before this podcast. His name is Suraj Sajo.
Hello. I'm glad to be here.
Suraj, it's good to have you on.
I'm not gonna lie, a little stressed right now.
That's okay.
The
That's
famous
okay.
podcast, Nazranis in the City.
Ooh, I don't know about famous, but it's good. It's good. Once again, audience, we thank you for taking the time to listen. Today we got something special for you. We actually, we're gonna go over a document, I guess, and maybe it'd be good, Suraj, just to kind of get a background on you and then how you came to, because it was Suraj who showed us this document. The document is called "The Courage to Be Ourselves" by Archbishop Joseph Tawil. Tawil, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
Suraj, take it away.
I think a little background on myself. Born and raised Syro Malabar Catholic. And my parents have always, wanted to be around the Syro Malabar Church. So, this house, we're the closest to our Syro Church. And the only reason we got this house was because of that. They didn't really look at the schools or anything, but it was because of that. So I've always, grown up in the church, and I was blessed to really, I guess, be blessed with really amazing friends, amazing chairtons and JGs that have always walked with me. And so I think slowly in that I developed this deep love for my community. But at the same time, I think there are, in a young mind, a lot of things that I guess maybe you just subconsciously think, this is an Indian community, Malayali community. There's a sense of, I think, like homeness that you feel because everyone else looks like you. And so that was always there as well. And so, I think that's not a little bit about me. But I think this letter, right? And so one time we were, me, Josh, Abhi, and Josh's little brother, Michael, we were hanging out. And we were talking about, the Syro Malabar Church in America. Why do we need it? What's the purpose of it? And honestly, it was a tough question to answer. We couldn't put our finger on, really, what it is, that made this necessary. Was it just because there's a bunch of Indian people that came to America and therefore we need to accommodate for that and make it a cultural thing? Is that what it is, or is there something more? And that really struck my heart because I love my Syro Malabar Church, and you guys know I'm on the traditional side of Syro Malabar Catholicism, right? But still, it really tugged on my heart. I'm what is this? And I doing my Google and nothing coming up, and Kevin Hutchin, he's the first Syro Malabar Catholic American-born priest.
Just by a month, okay? Just by a month.
Yes, they were both. Rajeev Hutchin and Kevin Hutchin were both ordained in the same summer, but he was the first one. But
Say it again.
But anyways, yeah. And so Kevin, I was really what's our purpose to be here? All these things, and Kevin Hutchin actually.
You were texting him this.
Yeah? Yes, I was texting him. So Kevin Hutchin at the time, he was in Chicago. I'm in California, and so first off, that's the other thing. Our diocese is so spread out, and so all these different time zones and everything. But anyways, text him, and all these questions of me being troubled, and he sends me this letter, and he was like, "Yo, this, Melkite Greek Catholic, which is another Eastern Rite of the Catholic Church, Eastern Rite Church, sui juris Church of the Catholic Church." This Archbishop actually addressed this, 50, 60 years ago. It was written in 1970, which is crazy because the issues that he addresses in this letter is everything that that we are facing today in our church. And so that I guess just to know that this was actually addressed 60 years ago was or 50 years ago was I think kind of comforting. And so and then low on Archbishop Joseph Tawil, right? So I think the only thing that I do know about him that I think is worth mentioning is that he was a bishop he was born in Damascus, Syria, and he was ordained a bishop, and he was primarily there. He was fluent in a lot of languages, but not English. And then he was appointed as the Archbishop of the Melkite Greek Catholic Eparchy of Newton. And he came to America, I think 1968, late 60s, and he came here and then learned English for his mission that was assigned to him, which I thought was amazing because this letter was amazing. His sheer skill of being able to grasp the language that quick and be able to minister and be a father to an eparchy like that in that time was crazy. And so just a little bit about it.
Because you said he came here in the late 60s, and this letter was given to his eparchy 1970.
Yep.
It took him a couple of years. And the thing about why we wanted to share this letter is because, I mean, so Suraj, we're going to go into the letter, but he read it, and then he gave it to Abi and I, and we're reading this. It's like, oh my gosh, he's hitting on so many things that we're going through. So this letter, in a way, was almost prophetic for our eparchy.
And I think applicable to all the Eastern churches that are to come and that are here, right? But yeah. And so I think maybe we can get started.
Yeah. I don't think we're gonna read the whole
Yeah.
letter down, but we can just share kind of the main points.
Yeah, we'll post it in the descriptions.
Yeah, that's a good idea for sure.
Ooh, okay, man. I want to go through the whole thing, but okay.
We can start from the top, go down.
I think for me, like what stood out, I mean, obviously so many good points, but I think the biggest thing that stood out to me is just simply that question of like, why are we even here? Like, why do we need to be here? Because I mentioned this in a previous podcast with Rajeev when, like, I've had people ask me, and I've thought the same thing of, wouldn't it just be a lot more effective from even like not a convenience perspective, but like a faith perspective? Wouldn't it be a lot more convenient to just assimilate with the Latin church here? We can have Indian communities like they had the German churches and, Italian churches and stuff, but why don't we just assimilate with the Latin church? Because there's so much, material out there, richness, resources, and we can, assimilate with the culture here too, which would be really good for our youth and all of these things. This seems like the perfect thing to do, to just assimilate with the Latin church here. So like both for Syro Malabar and all the other Eastern churches that are here, like the Melkite church for Bishop, like, why do we need Eastern Catholicism in America? For us, specifically, Syro Malabar. And that question itself, like Suraj said, like, I'd look this up everywhere. When I was in seminary, I'd ask people this. Thinking about seminary, when people would ask me why Syro Malabar, nothing, right? But then, that letter, Suraj sent this to us, and I was like, that's literally what this letter is about. He's asking that question and kind of fleshing it out of, why do we need Syro Malabar in the West? Or Eastern Catholicism, but like I said, in our case.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is that this letter isn't, addressing everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are a few things that are very similar to us, and it's comforting to know that. And so, yeah, I think it's important to stress it's not like one thing, one answer.
One-to-one ratio. Yeah,
exactly.
You're right.
Exactly.
You're right. That's true.
But I think, and so maybe we can just start off with that, right? I'll just, go ahead and read off, one of the lines right here. The church cannot be identified, it's stressed, with any one culture, nation, or form of civilization without contradicting that universality which is of the essence of the gospel. And he goes on to talk about, the word Catholic itself means universal, right? And so, and I think he points out that Latin Catholicism was the one superior rite for the longest time seen as that, but that actually contradicts everything that the Catholic Church is. It makes no sense. And so, I think that was really awesome to see that being able to, coming here and knowing that who I am matters, right? I mean, just once again, it's not an exact answer to the question that we're asking, but at the same time that there's still, bits and pieces of some sort of comfort there.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is like something I've been really finding a lot of comfort in is understanding that we are a unique part of the whole, right? And I think it's especially interesting to connect what we're talking about in this letter to what's going on right now, right? Like, if we're going to be honest, like, Catholicism is being attacked in a lot of different ways. And part of that conversation is that like Christianity was enforced onto so many peoples, right? But we talked about this in that other podcast, how like that's not the case. You look at like Peter was not the only apostle around, right? Like there were other apostles going to other parts of the world, and sowing the seeds of the gospel there, and allowing other liturgies to be formed, other churches to be formed, right? And we're one of those.
Yeah, I think really emphasizing that this wasn't, like, especially our faith, Melkite faith, and all of these things, these were formed by themselves in freedom. Because, like you said, we talked about this in the earlier episode, but oftentimes the image of Catholicism, especially for non-Catholics, is colonialism. That's the kind of things that are associated with each other, and that throws people off, understandably. So I think the beauty and importance that, no, without any force, without this colonial presence, and without any sort of motivation to assimilate into the Western culture that we may have right now, our forefathers decided that Christianity was the way to go. And I think like that's something that was the one thing that really did convince me to stay. It was like there was something there that they had no reason culturally to become Christian, right? Because, you know, according to tradition, most of them were probably either like Brahmins, the Jews there, or whatever, like all these different groups that socially speaking, it was actually a negative thing to become a Christian, because it probably, I mean, again, I don't know the complete history behind it, but I'm sure there was like social backlash to it, especially, I mean, like the Brahmins that converted and stuff. This is high class society, and they're converting to Christianity, which like either people didn't know much about, or I'm sure didn't have the social status, right? Especially in the early church. It's like, why? There's no need to assimilate with the culture. The culture was something different. It was predominantly Hinduism. So that like thought for me was really what kind of like, I mean, still something that kind of keeps me going, is like, why is it that my ancestors chose this faith in this particular way, even when people came, like the Portuguese and stuff? Why was it that this was so important to them?
Yeah. So, I mean, going off that, we have something in our heritage, you know, to bring to the table. But a lot of times the perspective that we have is more, how can we become like them? How can we assimilate?
Yeah.
But we don't think from the other perspective that actually we have something that's really valuable to bring. If we're looking at, you know, as this like a pie or something, the pie is not complete. Yes, a good portion of the pie is here in the West, in America, but there is a significant portion. Maybe it's small, but it's important.
Yeah.
It might be even a little tasty, a little different in the way it tastes, but it's important. It's significant. And I think in this letter, the Archbishop is just trying to offer that perspective of, look, you have something to give. There's this specific line which I really love. He said, in a very real sense, the Western Church needs a vibrant Eastern Church. It's not just like, please come, okay, you guys can be around and do your thing. No. We need you to be vibrant. We need your very much presence. And he goes on to add, because it complements the understanding of the Christian message.
Yeah.
So there is real difficulty, and we can see that right now. The message of Catholicism is not being received, especially where we are sitting in Los Angeles, right? It's not being received well. And so, you know, the church can use some complementary messages that might come, especially from our own church or from the Eastern rites, you know?
Yeah.
Especially like, it's interesting to think about how our culture has a great respect for the minority. And they really, in a very good way, they wish to raise up the minority. So why not jump on that train, you know? Like,
No, seriously, that's a good point. Like there is, yeah.
Because it's always about like, oh, who's the biggest, you know, dog in the park, and let's take them down, right?
Yeah,
That it seems like that's what the logic is.
Sure.
And us, like, and then this is why, you know, Archbishop Tawil is like literally pleading to his people, and I think in a way pleading to us, like, we need to stand up, and because our Western brothers and sisters, like, it's really them that's under attack, you know, in a lot of ways, and we need to like be vibrant in who we are, to show that like how the culture perceives Catholicism is not what it is, right? Yeah. We are the universal church. We are not just the Western church.
Yeah, that's a super good point. Backing up in a sense.
Yeah.
Even like there's this line right here. Like, honestly, I'll just read it out real quick. It's often easier to get lost in the crowd than to affirm one's own personality. It takes more courage, character, and inner strength to lead our traditions to bear fruit than it takes to simply give them up. The obsession to be like everyone else pursues us to the innermost depths of our hearts. We recognize that our greatest temptation is always to slip into anonymity rather than to assume our responsibility within the church. And that line, like, I was just reading that right now, and like we just did the episode for RIM, like identity. And you think about that like on an individual level, like relationship, identity, and mission. But I was reading this and I was like, that applies to us as a right too. That applies to us as the Eastern Church. We have to find like what our relationship with God is in the church, what our identity is, and what our mission is, especially here in this context. And like as the letter goes through, we have all of those things. I mean, I think that's kind of starts to answer that question of why do we need it here.
Yeah, and I think, just coming back to what you were saying, Acha, because another line here in the letter that he says is, we must know that we have something to give, otherwise we have no reason to be. Yeah. Right? I think first off, that's awesome, because sometimes I'm not gonna lie, like sometimes it feels like we're being Syro Malabar for the sake of being Syro Malabar. Oh, we're like even right, and I think recently like that whole emphasis on it's Qurbana for the Syro Malabar liturgy and not mass, and to the point where it's like we're putting down the Latin liturgy, like we're superior, right? I mean, not that that's the reality, but it comes out like that. Yet, what is it that we bring to the table, right? And so I think him pointing out that if you don't know, then there's no reason to be. And so I think the question that I want to pose to all of us is, what is that reason that we have to? Maybe we may not have an answer, but I think it's worth discussing. Like, what reason do we have to be? What do we have to give to the Western society, Western world, and our Eastern faith?
Well, I think it's interesting because I've been thinking about how part of the answer is understanding that we are the. I think I said this before earlier, but like we are the unique part of the whole, right? So, and there's two ends of the spectrum where like one end of the spectrum is like you totally lose your sense of uniqueness, and then you fall into like kind of just dissipating and just like not caring for your tradition or whatever, right? So that's one end. The other end is caring too much to the point where perhaps like you've separated yourself from the whole, right? Yes. Focusing too much on being Syro and not enough on the fact that you're part of a greater Catholic church, right? Or like the greater Catholic church, right? So I think part of the answer is like really like concretely understanding our place, right? Like we are a unique expression of God's salvific message to the world, right? Right now, especially in Western culture, people are only exposed to one expression of that, and that's the Western church, right?
Majority.
Yeah. Majority, yeah. But I think what we bring to the table is like there's another way that you can live this out. Yeah. There's another way that you can express this, and in a beautiful way, might I add, right? Yeah. Like exposing, like we mentioned this in our other podcast with Rajeev, but like it's been incredible. Like when we were in seminary to expose non-Syro Kerala people to the Qurbana. Like a lot of people don't even realize what the Eastern Church is, and even if they do, they think it's only like the Byzantine Church, you know? Yeah. And I just want to be like, I'm right here, I'm not Byzantine and I'm still Eastern, and we need to, and that's what I think, man. Like, so right now I'm doing my master's degree in theology, and there's this question that's coming up, like as I continue to study, that like we need to seriously uncover and promote the Eastern Church's role in the new evangelization, because I think that's a huge part of evangelizing to a pluralistic world, right? A pluralistic world, yeah. That is not just like one expression of the salvific message of the Catholic Church that you can experience. That there are literally like 23 different ways that you could do it if you wanted.
Right. So, I mean, to your question and what Josh is saying is I think we just need to try to do something, essentially. Talk about ourselves. I was kind of getting just an image or going back to an experience of seminary classroom, as Josh was mentioning, seminary, particularly when I was in Italy. So there was a lot of hesitation in my own being to not want to speak, because obviously the language of the class is in Italian, right? And and we've all been in this situation we're in a classroom where we feel like we can say something, but we're like, do I really want to say anything? I mean, this class will go on even if I don't say anything. There might be like that one smart person or a few people that talk, and the classroom will just go.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
That we'll get through even
They carry the team.
Yeah, we'll get through the course or even that lesson, even if we don't say anything. But then you're like, I probably should say something. Who cares? Like, what does it really matter if I say it?
Yeah.
But you're feeling stirred in your heart to say it. And then I remember it was one of those moments where I'm like, how do I phrase this sentence? Do I really want to say it? And then of course the professor asks, does the Syro Malabar seminarians, do they want to say anything? Because I think they might have something to contribute to this conversation. And then we're like, oh man, I didn't say anything. Luckily Kevin Hutchin was there and he said something. But still, like that, I still remember that very well. And I think it's symbolic in a certain sense of the reality of the church. We might feel like the church will continue, right? Even if we look at the issues that we have in our society right now, we have very strong archdiocese, Latin diocese, very good priest, lay faithful who are going to be the voice of the Catholic Church. It can go on in that way, but we do have something valuable to say. What it is, I don't know. Maybe it's just sharing the struggle. Maybe it is just little things of appreciation of how we are strengthened in trying to be Syro Malabar. So I just put that out there because it doesn't have to be big, but just like literally just having the courage to just open our mouths and say something, to give this image of that there is another perspective besides Roman Catholicism.
Yeah, I think that definitely means a lot because oftentimes we feel like insecure. I mean, maybe like man, I don't know the answers. Like what am I gonna do, right? So I think that's awesome. But I think another thing also to realize that we all oftentimes overlook what we do have, right? And the first thing we have is the Holy Qurbana. Which we will overlook it. I mean, even you, you went over a beautiful liturgy. But we're like, we didn't get into it, right? But the thing is, it's important that we get into it, and I think it is it's a different expression of faith, totally different. And like the crazy thing is, like me, I go to Qurbana and I just stand there like I do see this every Sunday, and it's Malayalam too, like whatever type thing, and then yet. There are times during quarantine where it's extremely limited capacity, like these women that are not of Indian descent, and men as well, that come and attend this liturgy that isn't even in English, right? I mean,
at your church?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh wow.
And the thing is, at that time there are other Latin churches that are also open, right? And so I think that gives sense. They came consistently, and I think I heard this from your brother. They came, I think, like 2-3 weeks in a row, and that was like. That's crazy. Like, dang, so there's something that, these people of this Western world are taking away from this. And then, and the small things like the congregation's, participation in the, divine liturgy and in the Holy Qurbana, I think that's very different from how it is in the Latin Rite. I think, and then they're like, it's just there's so many very descriptive words in it. Like I think the thing that comes to my mind, I think my favorite part of the Qurbana is, thousands upon thousands of angels gather around. That's the second Gahanta, right before we get into the Eucharistic prayers, and like that's the image right there. And like I overlooked that for the longest time. I didn't even think about that until once again his brother, he's like, "Yo, this is so cool," what these thousands of angels thing. And I was ever since that. Every time we get into that, it's just this image of. Literally all the thousands of angels there with me, all these saints there with me, because that is what is happening during Holy Qurbana, right? And and when you pay attention to those specific words, it's like, man, this is a totally different experience. And I think the same goes to say in the Latin Rite. I mean, if you pay attention to the words, it's a very different experience than when you just go and receive. But
I mean, like to that point, like the last thing on you go to Latin Rite, same. That's how I used to think was like. Because that was my biggest problem. Like even when we were in Tahoe having this argument, like you were mentioning before us, and I kept pushing back against this idea of the Syro Malabar. When I kept asking that question of like why Syro Malabar, you guys would bring up the liturgy and say like again, good point, right? But you guys would say like, these prayers are so beautiful and all these things. And quite honestly, I'd say, what was my response, right? Like I don't feel that with the Syro Malabar Qurbana. Just very honestly, I felt that with the Latin Mass. I understand these prayers and I'm able to experience something heavenly. I wasn't able to with Syro Malabar Qurbana, right? And so there are like two things from that is, number one, what do you understand from that? It's not that one liturgy is better than the other.
No. They are all equal.
Right. And it's not, and there are certain aspects of concentration on beauty, but it's not even
Sure.
the more beautiful
Right.
thing, right?
Right.
And like, because I think sometimes that's definitely promoted, of like Eastern more beautiful than Latin. And again, certain aspects, yes, the concentration on the arts and icons and things, of course. But I feel like there's a little bit of error in saying more beautiful, because all rites, the church, the universal church is true, good, and beautiful, right? We have, so to say those sort of levels to it kind of corrupts it. And that's where my thinking was. And the second thing was actually maybe at different points in my life, the liturgy experience was different. So for example, the past couple of weeks having Rajeev in here, he's my new assistant pastor, like I've been able to altar serve in the private Qurbanas with you. And that's been a completely different experience for me. Like, it's not that I wasn't paying attention necessarily to the prayers before or not trying to really actively participate, but there was something different being there. I mean, maybe it was the fact that I was like so close to the altar, nobody else was there, so I didn't have focus on anything else. I don't know what it was, but I was really able to hone in on what these prayers were saying and like bring it into the like context of the world around me. I think that's something I actually haven't been able to. I mean, now I appreciate the Latin Mass for this aspect more after seeing it in the Qurbana. What that aspect is I was, especially this one prayer, I don't know where exactly it is, but it's open the Lord's the gates of justice for us, and then you go into the compassion of the Lord. Like I was so emotional at that point because we see everything going around. We see injustice on all sides. We see all the chaos in the world, and we see like all these things, and we feel it. And that's what we're coming to Mass and Qurbana with. And I going back to like the Mass, I remember in Bishop Barron's like series on the Mass, he really stressed that one, the part of bringing up the gifts, how we're offering all our pains and sufferings. And that's, we're literally offering the entire cosmos to God, and he takes it, but doesn't keep it to himself. He converts it into his very body and gives it right back to us. Everything that we give. And I didn't really fully appreciate that until this part in the Qurbana, like the open, O Lord, the gates of justice for us.
Open, O Lord, the gates of justice for us.
Go.
Beautiful.
I ain't about that solo life.
But man, because it really brought me into the context of the world and what the Qurbana was doing. That like Christ was really sacrificing in that moment, which therefore forever opened up the gates of justice. And like, because that's what the whole gospel message is, right? This liberation. Not necessarily in the complete political sense, but there is that core aspect of Christ is liberating us from our suffering, but not in the way that we perceive it. And I think like that line in the Qurbana, in the context of where it's occurring, really stood out to me at that point. Something that hadn't stood out to me before, of like, we're like, this isn't just pausing what's going on with your life. This isn't like you're taking out some time, to kind of be at peace. I mean, of course that should happen at least, but this is a part of your life. This is a part of your daily activities. This is a part of like the life you're trying to live out is in union with the church, offering the sacrifice for everything around. And I wasn't able to like understand that fully until recently. So I was just thinking about like, man, this one aspect has helped me. This one tiny line has helped me fall in love with the Qurbana and the Syro Malabar Rite. So how many people probably witness one or two prayers in the Qurbana or any of the Eastern rites or the Mass and are like, this is like something that stands out to my faith and gets me closer to Christ. And if that's the case, then like, why wouldn't we promote this? Like, what if there's somebody else out there exactly like me? And there are, right? Like that just one prayer speaks to them in who God is and what he's doing for us. And like this whole idea of like Christ would have died for one person. I think we should probably bring that into our own attitudes, right? Because even we speak about like the pie thing, and that's a great image to help us understand. The only downfall is it makes it seem like numbers, right? That's all analogies. That's where they fall short, right? It's like maybe we shouldn't think about it. Not that all of us are, but we shouldn't think about it from the aspect of like backing up the Latin church and bring in more numbers. Like they'll bring in the bulk, we'll bring in a couple. Like this is not numbers, but what is effective, what speaks to some people may not speak to others, and vice versa. So our role is to speak our voice so that people that adhere to that can really like experience God in that way. And how to go about that is, I think, exactly the things you were talking about, right? Just being vulnerable, speaking up in like the class.
Speaking up. Inviting people is key.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be a huge group, but maybe when you invite that one person who's never experienced ceremonial liturgy, it allows you to maybe focus. You probably might be someone who takes the book, but now if someone's standing next to you, you got to show them at least how to navigate the book, and then something might stand out to you. I think it's key because going back to the letter, the Archbishop is kind of inviting that we just be open to this perspective, but he's also at the same time giving a warning, and he's got the title of a danger to this mission, the ghetto mentality, right?
Yeah.
And at first, when I saw that title, I'm like, what are we going to talk about with the ghetto, right? But essentially, if we are all about assimilating and we're just kind of making our churches more of this ghetto in the sense of like kind of closed in on itself, then we will disappear. We're not going to be able to do a proper, like witnessing of our church. And it reminds me of a story, again, when I was in seminary. I brought Kevin Etchen and I were introducing the Qurbana at St. Joseph's Seminary, right? For the first time, right? And I was a little nervous because we decided that we were going to give a small introduction to the Qurbana right before the Qurbana started. So Bishop Angardiat is there, but we asked him if he wants to do the introduction. He said, no, you guys do it. And we're just like first year, seminarians essentially, like, I don't know anything. So we're, trying to explain a little bit, and then there was a moment for questions, and I was like, I hope no one asks any questions because I have no answers to why we do these things. I'm only learning them, and I don't really know anything.
Yeah.
And one question comes, and I really didn't like the question. I didn't have much of an answer then, but he asked, because I said that we're going to have incense, and there's a little bit more incense, and he asked this question of, what's the difference between incense in the Roman Rite and in the Syro Malabar Rite? And he answers the question himself, and he's like, do you guys just put curry powder in the incense?
Oh.
But it was kind of like a little bit of like, what?
Yeah.
But
That's done, man.
I'm like, what? But at the same time, I look back at that kind of comment, and is our like church just like some Indian little bubble where we are all about just being, and obviously we don't use curry powder, we use frankincense, we use different types of incenses, right? But that's
the image that's out.
Is that cannot be the image that other people have of this church.
Right.
Like it's this place where Indian people do Indian things. But no, it's a place where, the majority are Indian Catholics who come from this rich heritage, are trying to live out their Catholic faith. So people should not be afraid to get inside of our bubble. And if it is, then it is a ghetto, right? And
that's more on us than external, fear.
Yeah, I think the way that he puts it, he literally says, one day all our ethnic traits, language, folklore, customs will have disappeared. Time itself is seeing to this. It doesn't get clearer than that. And he goes on to say, they've seen this in the Italian, German communities after that one generation. The community is dead. The churches are done, right? And I think that, this might be a little too blunt, but the question that I feel like I want to ask to our parents, the community, the Syro Malabar community in America is, have you put all this work into, building your diocese here and doing all of this here so that it ends with you? Or do you desire to see it grow farther than you? Right? I mean, and I think that's really, what I struggle with when let's keep it real, the struggles in our diocese, right? Is the struggle of having English Qurbana in certain parishes, right? Like, do you want to see this die here? Do you want this to just satisfy your craving for some Malayali heritage, or do you care that your children actually take something away from this, right? Is it for the sake of culture? Yeah.
This is interesting because I feel like we can say this because we know the truth of the Qurbana. We know we know that it's primarily about the celebrating the Eucharistic ministry, and we've come into contact with that, right? You literally said like these prayers helped you encounter the Lord in a particular way, right? I also think, and then this is interesting to me because my sister and I were talking about this, how like it was actually in going to our Latin parishes and going and spending time with the Roman Catholic Church in various ways. Like my sister was a Life Team missionary, right? That's a great organization that the Roman Church has produced for the American people. And she said that it was actually in doing those things that she became more strengthened in who she was as a unique Syro Malabar Catholic, right? And I bring this up because I feel like for most of our upper generation Syro Malabar Catholics, they don't have any exposure to the Roman Church, right? Even in Kerala, it's all the same, right? I feel like the difference there. I mean, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the difference isn't really stressed in Kerala.
No, yeah.
And therefore, like they're coming here, they don't really see a need to it's okay for them to just be the ghetto community.
Right, because the average Catholic, especially within our community, is probably not thinking about, this liturgy, this liturgical prayer is,
right.
And
right, and I feel like we ourselves have to be educated, and we ourselves have to understand that we are a unique part of the whole.
Just working with couples for marriage preparation, it's very interesting, especially working with those couples that are getting married at being born in Kerala, because when you have to write down your religion, oftentimes you either write RC or LC. So RC in Kerala is associated generally as Syro Malabar Catholic. So RC stands for Roman Catholic, and then LC is Latin Catholic, right? So even in Kerala, sort of the idea of being Syro Malabar Catholic is Roman Catholic. It doesn't quite make sense, but that's just the way it's kind of put there, and then LC is Latin Catholic. And then even another thing, we've been trying to emphasize this identification of Qurbana and Mass, but the reality is a lot of times Mass is English, Qurbana is Malayalam. Yeah. So even Roman Catholic Malayalis use the word Qurbana to identify their liturgy.
Yeah.
So these are just this is just a reality in terms of how Catholicism looks like at times in Kerala, and so we're doing something a little different. For a valid purpose, right?
Right, and I think that's what I was trying to get at. Like I can only understand who I am by being with people who are different from me, right? Mm-hmm. Like my Syro Malabarness really comes out when I encounter the Roman Church.
Yeah, and I think the benefit that we have is I was reflecting on this a while back. Was that like I get a taste of both of them, right? I mean, truth be told, I mean, on Sundays and maybe a few weekdays here and there, I go to my Syro Malabar Church, and then on the weekdays, because of flexibility of Mass times and Qurbana times, things like that, and also because we didn't have daily Qurbana offered at our parish.
That's right. I suppose. No, but I do the same thing.
Right, but the thing is, I get to go to these, the Latin churches and really experience something totally different, and then also, come back and receive something different as well from my home parish, right? Using both the lungs of the church, and I think that it's a awesome experience of experiencing Christ in that way.
There's this image that I've been playing around with how like you can imagine all 23 different churches of the Catholic Church as different notes to one chord. It's one chord, right? And in being one chord, it's beautiful, right? But it has all these individual parts to it, right? And I feel like maybe to elaborate on that image, we can really hear the Roman chord. Like that note is being played a lot more loudly, perhaps, than the other chords. And it's time for us to increase the volume on our note at least.
Yeah.
That actually made so much sense. When you started, I was like, "Yo, it's getting a little too deep." With this. But then it made sense, bro.
I mean, there's this phrase, truth is symphonic, right? There's not one, how do you say it? There's not one avenue, right? There's not one expression of it, multiple expressions,
Right.
of the same mysteries.
Yeah. There's one more thing about this letter, and he speaks about communion. Especially the relation that we need to have in bringing back the Orthodox Church. And
Yes.
this is where that chord that you're speaking about, when the Eastern chord is becoming stronger and stronger, there is a lot more possibility for these relations to, really be substantial and the possibility of communion. Just a quick example from, again, my priesthood. I had a chance to walk with a girl who, essentially born Syrian Orthodox, but wanted to get married to a Syro Malabar Catholic, but really desired that the liturgy be similar to what she had experienced, particularly the marriage liturgy. And so we explored basically an option where the wedding was done in the Malankara, right?
Oh.
And for her, she was at home with that because it's very similar to what she grew up with. And I remember just being present at this wedding liturgy. I was like, wow, she feels very much at home because there was this, Catholic rite. Our brothers and sisters, the Syro Malabar Catholics, right? That rite was something very, homely for her. So that is something too that we bring to this conversation. Being who we are, there is a greater chance of more communion with the Orthodox Church.
Yeah, unity.
Unity, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even Kerala itself, right? There's besides the Syro Malabar and Wanka, I think two apostolic churches, and it's just it's so sad. It's just sad to see, how yet we were all one community at one point, and yet now we are all in different paths.
Yeah.
And sad to see. And I think the point that he was making was that being Catholic and Latin is not synonymous. That was the point, right? And to see that union means of the separated churches means ecclesiastical assimilation. If I'm pronouncing that right.
Ecclesiastical
Assimilation, but not not the liturgy that is sacred. And so I think that's super important.
Yeah. Even just one more thing is that we have a pretty unique experience here in America of being of Malayali heritage, of being Syro Malabar Catholic, because also we get very close to all these people of different churches because of the Malayali, heritage, but Jacobite, Marthoma. And so I think that can also be part of us being very strengthened in our identity because we have a very, real possibility of being close to all these different, denominations of Christianity.
Yeah.
That we can bring in such a profound way to the conversation about Catholicism with all this experience, our basketball tournaments and, Christmas ecumenical programs, we might be like, oh, whatever, but it's actually a very cool and unique experience,
I think even with on the note of unity when it comes to the Orthodox and all of these things, that's definitely something super present there that we need to kind of work towards.
Sure.
I think even before that, even within the church, we have so much opportunity to connect with the other churches here that I feel like we don't take advantage of.
Yeah.
That the idea is individuals, Josh, I, and Suraj, we and you too, like grew up going to Latin and Syro Malabar and that formation from both. But the churches themselves weren't, a hand-in-hand formation for the communities. Like what if, Santana and LA Church of SoCal, Syro Malabar, kind of collab. Josh says collab.
I think it sounds cooler. That's all I'm saying.
But like, a collaborated effort for evangelization within the churches of the same regions.
Yeah.
Especially like our diocese, we don't have, our actual, not sister parishes, but our parishes within the diocese close to us, right? Because we're all so spread apart across the country. Like parishes are meant to be a part of a diocese, not to be part of like just themselves in their own isolated bubble. And we have so many things that are already sort of pushing for that bubble within ourselves. Like, why are we adding another layer to it? You know what I mean? Like within the ethnic identity, there's that temptation to keep it malu. There's that temptation to kind of keep it as, hey, every Sunday, this is the one time we get off work. Let's just hang out with our family friends. And so there's all these temptations. And I can speak for our own parish. Like we had almost no connection with the diocese. Like besides the formal connection, like the West, I feel like has been sort of not as much connection since we're so far from places like Chicago, New York, and Texas, and all of these things that are sort of like hubs for Syro Malabar, right? Like that caused a lacking in our formation because our parish was just our parish. So the adults and I think mainly the youth lacked an experience of that universality, lacked an experience to where not just at an individual level, like I may have went to a Latin church and Syro Malabar Church and you, whatever, but as a community, we're both, receiving and giving to the other churches, the Latin church, whatever Eastern churches are around, and seeing like how can we move together and promote that idea of universality rather than taking the much harder step of being like, let's grow Syro Malabar as much as possible and then we'll give to the Latin church.
Yeah, that's
let's figure this all out and then let's start evangelizing to the Latin church.
That's right. There has to be a unified
Right.
approach to things. I mean, it's something I listened to another podcast, Catholic Stuff You Should Know, and one of the guys was talking about they're all priests. One of the priests was talking about how the unity of the Trinity has to be shown. Like not only is it reflected like onto each person and that we're made in the image of God, not only is it shown and reflected in the family and that there's supposed to be a unity in each family, but it also has to be reflected in, literally the unity of our churches too.
Yeah.
Right? Because if someone were to look from the outside in on the Catholic Church as a whole, they would see a fragmented,
Yeah. And that's
disfigured
embarrassing.
thing.
It's wrong and it's embarrassing. Just at a very practical level, the fact that most of the churches don't know that Syro Malabar exists.
Right.
But I think one thing that I do want to add is like I think for majority what we're saying is true, but at the same time, our founding father of our parish, Father Jacob Katakil, Father Dr. Jacob Katakil, he was a man that really did evangelize. Yeah. I think he's the only Syro Malabar priest. I mean,
He is still evangelizing.
Exactly, right? But and the crazy thing is that I think baptized numerous people of our our parish, the people just locally around, just actually really going on walks and speaking with these people and them choosing to be baptized by him and received into the Catholic Church. Like that, those are amazing things. But I think like the craziest thing is right. So 2 houses that next to our parish. There's this one house. I guess I don't know the people that live there, but Katakilachin left, and then 5-10 years passed, and then we find out whoever woman, no one else knows who lived at this house. This woman here passed away, and in her will she wrote that house go to the church, the Syro Malabar Catholic Church. 2 houses down, and that's insane to me. Why would this random woman that no one from our church knows right now, right? That I'm sure no one but Katakilachin knew too, somehow do that. Like I think, right? And so I think it's important. And I think I just want to highlight, right, like how awesome that is that he did that. But at the same time, I've never seen that anywhere else.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the issue.
And it's also like not to blame Karagalachen at all, like, but it's sad to me that was a sole effort from the priest. I mean, I'm sure there was other people, like some, like that wasn't a move of the Syro Malabar Church or the move of Santana Parish, and that is something that's something that needs to change from our part, me included, right?
Exactly,
of like, we can't just, again, to bring the whole thing, it can't be like, let's figure this Syro Malabar thing out. Let's be proud of our Syro Malabar identity. Let's have all these events, this podcast, the Syro Creatives, all of these things, to as an effort to, you know,
lift ourselves
grow our
up.
own, ourselves up, and also like others, like as in like
Other Syro
at an
Malabar people.
individual level, other Catholics and other people that don't have faith. But as a community, in communion, how can we like actually evangelize? Does that make sense? Because I think we've talked a lot about like the individual side of promoting ourselves and really being proud of that, and those are important and good.
Sure, but on like a parish level.
Yeah,
you know,
parish
how
level,
do
on
they
a
live out
diocesan level.
mission?
Like this should be something that's encouraged.
Yeah.
You know, to that as a priest, you're not just sent to us; you're sent to that region, right? I think like even on the priestly aspect is a sort of symbol of how it's sent to everyone, right? Like where I feel like right now we're placed in a certain region. So my parish is placed in Milpitas and next to San Francisco for the Syro Malabars that are there, rather than we are putting a Catholic church here to evangelize the gospel to San Francisco.
Change of perspective right there. Yeah.
Right? Like I think that should be the attitude. The attitude shouldn't be we're placing this here for a community that's here.
And that's exactly what, you know, Archbishop Joseph Tawil was saying in this ghetto mentality.
Yeah.
That we must not just feed ourselves and just stay locked up in our little circle, but be a gift to the community, know what we bring to the American society, right? And even if we do know, we can't just keep feeding our American-born Syro Malabar people, right? But rather going out to the community and gifting ourselves to the community, because we are a gift. That is what he's affirming us in throughout this letter, and that's what Vatican II affirms us in. And so, you know, really living out to that call is, I think, what we should do, and I think that's what we're all saying.
Yeah, because you can't just sit back and like criticize the culture if you're not trying to have an impact on it. You know, I think because I've been recently reading this book called The American Catholic Almanac, and it's basically like 365 days. Each day they have a different particular story or person of American Catholicism, like just from the founding of the country onwards, of like Catholics that had an influence on the culture of America, politics, general culture, whatever, right? And just reading through each day, I'm like, wow. Like this politician or this bishop did this to influence the Constitution, or this bishop did this, or this priest did this layperson did this. And I see that, I'm like, or this parish opened up. So, for example, like in Chicago, there was like this one parish, I think that was one of the first churches to open up, that created a dedicated parish for Black Americans to attend during the time of segregation. One of the first churches to do that, if not the first. And that had like an amazing impact on Catholicism in Chicago. And, you know, for longest time, maybe until modern times, it was like a very hot spot of Catholicism, right? With a lot of immigrants, but especially this Black parish, that really stood out to me, because I was like, that was a conscious effort of the Chicago diocese to impact the culture and show that the value and dignity of Black Americans, and created a conscious effort to get them a place to worship. And that wasn't just about like, let's help out some of these Black Catholics that have asked us for a church. That's not what it was about. Like, this was a deliberate move by the Catholic Church to show something. And obviously there's not going to be that many deep occurrences of impact that we need to have. But that was just like a sign to me of like, even in the general sense of Catholicism, like we are called to be cultural critics, not in the sense of sitting back and complaining about everything, but like
Call to action.
Call to action.
Impact,
Yeah. And so what is that in the Syro Malabar sense? Like I don't think, you know, if we're just staying like, let's grow in Syro Malabar, let's grow in this, all of that is good, and let's, you know, promote it to other Catholics, good. But what are we doing like for the culture? Like how do we actively move towards it as a community?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes we get lost in this. I mean, the struggle between uncles and aunties, right? I mean, you guys are kids, and I think we're like, looking back on convention. I think convention was a beautiful thing, but the main point that was discussed there was the struggle between the younger generation and the older generation, and how younger generation doesn't get a voice. That is a very important topic that needs to be discussed and addressed. But at the same time, right, I think we forget about that we are Syro Malabar Catholics, that we are gifts to the community, as you were saying.
Yeah.
So one more thing, just he mentions at the end how we should be grateful to the Roman Catholic bishops who have helped us. And so that's, as you were speaking about this history and this moment in history, for us too, if we eventually have a book about our own history, we have many bishops to be grateful for who have, in a certain sense, been pushing us.
Right.
Have we taken that call to action? I don't know, but even look at
literally giving us
look at our cathedral, right?
Yeah.
The cathedral was given essentially the property and the church of that time for $1, essentially.
I didn't realize how symbolically beautiful that gesture.
Oh my
that
God.
our diocese cathedral is.
And it doesn't just end with the cathedral. I mean, several of our parishes throughout the country, the bishop has basically almost given the church and the property to us. So what are we doing, with it?
And that's just like the physical
That's
gesture,
just the-
right?
yeah.
Like not even considering all the others support.
Mm-hmm.
And like the effect of not just the hierarchy, but of people that were evangelized by the Latin Church before, how they have formed us. So like even if you think of like Catholic speakers, like Scott Hahn, right? He's formed by the Latin Church, but how many people has he formed within the Syro Malabar Church? Like how much have we learned from him?
Jevin James learned a lot.
Yes.
Even like our catechetical department, right? How much do we get from the different churches and all of these things, because it was that formation was there in the American context. Like, I mean, for the longest time, we straight up just used like Latin textbooks. But fortunately, we have our own now, working on improvements.
We have our awesome, with the catechetical director, Father George Donaville, putting in the hours.
I mean, it's true, man. Like, I just think about like the practical parts where it's like, we just don't go out into our own communities.
Yeah.
Like I know there are so many Syro Malabar parishes in America that have not talked to their neighbors.
Yeah.
And even something as simple as that, or something as simple as a service project in the general area, because they'll ask like, who's doing this? Mm-hmm. And that will literally be our opportunity to say, Syro Malabar Catholics. We're not just some Indian community. This is the Catholic Church going out into the region.
Yeah. Right? We had this one thing. I was telling you, we do like the serving the homeless at our parish, and we used to do that actually at a train station where like the homeless would gather typically, and so our church would go and we would serve there. Unfortunately, the county is like against health regulations, so now we actually use the hall of a local Latin church to serve. And I was just thinking about that right now, of like, there was actually a completely different image even from the serving at the train station to here. Obviously, there's practical reasons we didn't choose that, but before it was that image, like St. Thomas Syro Malabar Church is serving us and serving the Fremont community. Fremont's the city I'm from. And like that was a huge thing. And we've had like people in our parish like actually get awards for it from the city.
Wow.
And then I was thinking like we moved to the Latin Church, again, practical reasons, but I don't think that's same. I think people have the impression that this Latin Church is doing it.
Okay.
So I was just thinking about like continuing to do things like that, like whether it be social projects like that or just generally assimilating, inviting other churches to liturgies and things like that. It has an impact, because I mean I've seen it happen, and we're called to it, right? So regardless of what fruits we see, that's what we're called to.
Yeah.
I think we
I learned a lot.
I think I learned a lot. We dissected this letter.
That's right.
And thanks to Archbishop Joseph Tawil.
Yeah. And Abhi and I want to thank Father Rajeev and Suraj for your comments and your witness.
Do you guys have anything else to add?
Yeah. Nothing. If anything, let's just have the courage to be ourselves, huh?
Yes.
Got him. Okay. Well, on that note then, praise be Jesus Christ.
Now, always, and forever.